Hi, my name is Nicole Stoller-Peterson, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a child custody evaluator, and a former Child Protective Services social worker. I wanted to take a few minutes to share some information that could be helpful when talking to children about personal safety. Currently, I am the director of Kids Court and Counseling Center, and we are a nonprofit that helps children who have been a victim of crime or witness to a crime prepare for court. We would help them do trauma reduction and make it less scary and help them to stand a little bit taller. So what I want to do is reach out and hopefully open up the conversation so that there's less kids for me to see at the nonprofit. So I wanted to start off by sharing that this information is considered a resource. It's not a replacement for taking a training, a certification, a class. It's not a replacement for therapy or anything like that. This is truly a resource, so feel free to share it if you'd like. So what I wanted to start off with is when we talk to our kids, regardless of the age, we want to know who their safe people are. Who can they talk to when they're scared, when they're nervous about something, when maybe something's upset them? Who do they feel safe with? So it's a great way to open the conversation for a little or a big kid. And it's good to hear back from them who they consider to be trustworthy, and then also to extend upon that if they're saying their best friend who is also 5 years old, you probably want to give them some help with that, like talking to me and dad and your teacher and some safe people. So once that's been established, then you can move on and talk about personal safety. And what I want to avoid is always the concept of stranger danger, because the majority of children who are harmed by sexual abuse and most types of abuse, typically it's somebody that they know, somebody that they have a relationship with, and somebody that they trust. And so that's the hard part as a parent, to talk to our kids about. Sometimes people who we trust can also be people who could possibly be hurtful. So how do we have that conversation with them? Something that I do is I remind my kids, even if you see me shaking hands with a coach or a teacher or one of my friends or hugging somebody in our family, it doesn't mean that if something ever happened that you couldn't tell me. And they kind of look at you kind of puzzled, and I remind them that they're the most important things to me, and I'm going to always listen to them, and I'm going to believe in them. And so the conversation shifts a little bit. Excuse me. And so the conversation can be, yes, we want our kids to be respectful of adults and teachers and pastors and step parents and all these other important people in their lives. But at the same time, they also need to know that they can also talk to us, and that just because we shake hands with someone, it doesn't infer that now we have an alliance with that other adult. Because when kids see that, the assumption is that, okay, they're friends, this would be upsetting to them, therefore I can't talk to them about it. So we want to kind of open those doors up a little bit for them. And share that it's okay, that again, they're the most important thing. One of the things that came up too is that in different cultures we encourage a lot of hugging and kissing, and some kids just aren't comfortable with it. So it's something we want to be careful with, is when kids say they don't want to hug somebody, to pay attention to that and to not force them. And that can be hard sometimes in the generational push for some of our families. But again, we're talking about keeping kids safe and paying attention to them, and them learning that if something makes me uncomfortable, I don't have to make physical contact. So again, we're going to be reinforcing that they are in control of their bodies. And again, I'm not encouraging entitlement or anything like that, but I'm just talking about personal safety and recognizing when something feels a little off. So when we're talking to kids about their private parts, depending on their age, it can really range. So the conversation can be, I want to talk to you about keeping your body safe, and do you know on your body where your private parts are? And excuse me, for the littles, sometimes with boys it's easiest to say, it's the part of your body that you poop and your pee with, and they're like, and like, I know. And we say those are parts of your body that belong to you. So, unless you've got designated mom, dad, with wiping at certain ages, fine. But again, that you have to be there with them, and that no one else is supposed to touch them there. I do stay away from good touch versus bad touch, only because the majority of children that are sexually abused, that are perpetrated upon, the majority of them are not physically injured. And it's very confusing to them because the sexual abuse, usually there's something confusing in the brain. Is this really happening? I don't understand this. But then the body reacts. And that's where the shame steps in. And that's the same is true for, for our adult rape victims, is that, their brain is saying, screaming, stop, 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 and their body freezes up, at least in their minds, and they kind of go numb, but then their body reacts in a certain way, and then they feel ashamed that their body reacted. So for kids, it might tickle, it might be something that doesn't hurt. And if they giggled at the time and they don't associate it with being bad, we don't want them to associate themselves with being bad. So I tend to not use that terminology. I do talk about your body is yours, and being uncomfortable. Sometimes we can feel uncomfortable, and it's important to pay attention to when we start to feel uncomfortable and notice what's happening. Are we getting, our shoulders tensing? Is our heart racing? What's going on? And to recognize when we start to feel uncomfortable around different people. All of us have a sense and an ability to sense when something's off. And so we want to encourage that in our kids and learning to trust your gut, basically. I also wanted to talk about the difference between secrets versus surprises. So we want to talk to our kids about, good surprises, birthday presents, you clean the house. That'd be amazing. Good surprises that, you laid out your clothes for the next day. Wonderful. Whatever it is. But that's a surprise because it's something that will make somebody happy. A secret would be something that could hurt someone, right? So we want to encourage our kids to not keep secrets. They're not helpful. It's really an opportunity, opening a door for them to start hiding things that could potentially be dangerous for them. And especially if somebody has told them to keep a secret. We want to encourage them to know that they can talk to their safe person about whatever that is, so that they're not holding on to it. And we just want to reiterate again, there's a difference between a surprise and a secret. And we want to make sure that they're not holding on to any secrets, because that's a lot to carry. What else? I think the other issue is, a lot of people don't know how to find the words to have these conversations, and then they have to happen more than once. They have to happen as kids get older because the conversation changes. We're bringing in social media, we're bringing in a lot of other different elements that occur as kids get older. And so we just want to encourage that the conversation grows and continues just about personal safety, about having that ability to stand tall. And what if, one of their friends shares something with them about what happened to them? Do they know that they need to tell? Do they know that it's okay to talk to you about that you're going to help keep them safe? And so, because a lot of kids will actually go to their friends before they go to their parents about what's been happening. So we want to encourage them to still talk with us. Now, the big question, what happens if they disclose? What happens if they share something that has happened to them? How we respond is everything. So I encourage parents to really take the time to consider how you respond if your child says something upsetting to you, especially when we're talking about sexual abuse. So if your child were to disclose something to you, whatever that is, I encourage you to use some of these terms, and the reason for that, there's a ton of research, we don't have time for that, but we don't want to lead our kids, and we don't want to ask them questions that they think we want certain answers to, because kids tend to always want to please the interviewer and answer what they think we want to hear. So we want to stay away from that. So if your child discloses something, Mr. So-and-so has been doing this to me after school, okay? A response for you, tell me everything, okay? And they're going to look at you to see if you're upset. And if you start looking upset, they're probably going to start closing down on you. And so it's going to take everything in you as a parent or as a caregiver to not have that reaction. And so in your mind and in your heart, you have to stay strong, stronger than you've ever had to, for your kids' sake. Because if you do cry, because if you do start to get really upset, they're going to think you can't handle it. And it's going to tell them that they can't talk to you about that, and it's going to prove that they knew it was going to upset you. So then they start to pull back, and that's not what we want to have happen. We want our kids to talk to us. So some things you can say: tell me everything, tell me more, thank you for trusting me with this, I love you no matter what, I believe you, hugs and kisses, just, it can't be, how many times has this happened, where did it happen, we're not going there. Tell me everything about it. Okay, tell me anything about it. And then we really want to stay away from the whys. And this can be hard, because in our mind we're thinking, why didn't you tell us? Why did this happen? Why? But we can't say the word why, because if anybody's ever been asked a why word, it typically feels blaming. and shaming, and we want to stay away from it. So being asked a why is just not the time for it. And so if you ask, why didn't you tell us, why this? So the blame and the shame kicks in, and then again, you're going to have some withdrawal, and it's not, the outcome has never been positive. And then that typically kids will start to close up and not give us the information so that we can help keep them safe. So if a child discloses something to you where they're sharing that you were in a big room with maybe 20 people when this happened, and in your mind you're thinking, how is that even possible? I promise you it's possible. I can't count how many cases and investigations I've worked on where a child was sexually abused in a room full of people, whether there was a blanket and there was a movie going, or they were in a swimming pool and somebody offered to help them do a flip into the pool, and they kept them under the water an extra 2 seconds while they were molesting them. And the child's response is usually freeze. They look around and there's all these people and they're thinking, nobody's helping me, and is this really happening? And then they just want to get away. And it's really a great way for a perpetrator to get a child to submit by having others around, because it's basically saying, look, no one's going to help you, and then who's going to believe you, right? All these people were here, nobody saw, you didn't scream, right? You didn't scream, you didn't cry, because again, remember, most sexual abuse is not, doesn't cause injuries, and it's very confusing when it occurs, because typically, again, it's somebody that the child would trust, and they're confused by it, they don't understand it. Just to go ahead and piggyback onto that, then kids may or may not want to keep spending time with that person. That can be even more confusing if they choose to. But here's the thing, kids love the people that give them attention. They love the people that have been there for a very long time, whether deserved or not, and we have to remember that. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen because then they were with them another 10 times from the time they said it happened. That's irrelevant. Children just want to be loved. So we know how perpetrators can get to them. They look for kids who want to be loved. They look for kids who feel alone. They look for parents who are willing to just hand over their kids without a lot of questions. They look for parents to groom, sometimes more often than the kids, because they're interested in getting closer to the children. And then showing the child, again, look how close I am with your parents, right? They'll be so upset if you tell them this. Again, getting a child to submit. So just to go back and kind of cover everything, it's not going to be perfect. None of our conversations as parents are, but the best we can do is try and open up the conversation and talk to our kids. We want to make sure they understand about personal space, who their safe people are, the difference between a secret and a surprise. They need to know where their important private parts are and why it's important to keep them safe. Again, we want to reiterate that just because somebody's in a position of authority does not make it okay, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to believe them, because that's one of the biggest issues with people in power and control positions in the world, that, again, who's going to believe me? So we want to make sure we start really young with our kids, that they know that we're going to have their backs. So, and then again, if there's a disclosure, it's tell me everything, tell me more. Thank you for trusting me with this. It's my job to help you keep safe. And then just one little last piece. If a child discloses to you that it was a neighbor or a friend or a coach, don't call that neighbor or coach. Don't go over there. Don't ask questions. Stop there. Call law enforcement. Because if you give them the heads up, they're going to have a whole nother story prepared by the time law enforcement gets there. And law enforcement's hands are going to be tied, and then they're just going to go do it to more kids. So I know it's hard. I totally get it after many years doing this work. So I hope this is helpful. If there is, if there's a big question you have or something has come up and you're not sure where to turn, feel free to send us an email. Again, this is on behalf of Kids Court and Counseling Center. This is a resource. This is considered a free resource. If somebody determines they want to use this for training purposes, then feel free to contact Kids Court and Counseling Center, and then we can discuss a donation. But the intention is that this is really free and that it's intended to be used that way. It's intended to be used to help any family have the opportunity to maybe open up that conversation and maybe help with some of the words that can get stuck in our throat when we're talking about this really hard stuff. I think that's everything. I Hope this is helpful, and again, if there's a question comes up, you can feel free to reach out to us, and we're here. But just know that the more we talk to our kids, the better chance we have of keeping them safe. The more they feel strong, the more they have their own sense of self-esteem, the less they're going to look to somebody else for that esteem. So there's self-esteem and other esteem. Other esteem is, you did such a good job, and they say thank you, and then they look for somebody else to tell them if they did a good job. And then there's kids who say, I did a good job. I like my painting, and here's why. We have to build that up a little bit more so kids are less willing to go to others to receive that praise and that attention and that affection. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I wish you all well.